Okay, so I want to do a really quick update on some of the basil that I was propagating. And this is better results than I expected. So if this doesn't happen for you the first time, don't even worry. So I took basil cuttings on Friday. Today is Sunday. So in 2 days, I want to show you some of the progress that some of this basil has made. These are all cuttings that I took from my basil plant out front. It was getting really stringy and had long sections of its stem where nothing was being produced. And this was also really crowding the other plants so they couldn't get sunlight. So I planted out one from here already, and it's out in the same bin. I just spread them out. But I was really excited and wanted to show that some of these have already started to root. Okay, so this is a plant, and I started working on this before I thought of making the video. But if you can see on here, turn it, make sure we're getting you in focus. If you can see, those little white dots there are little roots. And the first thing I did when I pulled this out and I saw that I was getting roots right here is I trimmed, these ones were already trimmed, but I trimmed the leaves up into this top section. Now, normally when you're cutting your basil inside, like for harvest, and you're not going to be propagating it, you always want to trim the top, and that helps to keep it really bushy. But in this case, I really want to encourage these little roots to develop. And so I want to make sure, let's see, can you see them? Okay, hopefully you can see those okay. So I really wanted to make sure that they had room. Also, each of these places are called a node. Each place where a little leaf kind of branched off, they are called a node. And I want to encourage that in as many of these plants as I can. So here's another one that I clipped on Friday, and hopefully you can see, let's see, the back of my hand's a little tanner. You can see these little bumps starting on there, and those are forming roots as well. This is in 2 days, you guys. Then I have this little guy, and it's really hard to see, but he has 6 or 7 that are coming in. So I wanted to show you how I am, not only getting a harvest, getting some more plant, actual basil off of this that I will dry and use in Italian seasoning, and we love basil around here. But I wanted to show you what you want to look for and how to help it along. So this plant, if you can see on there, has a couple little nodes here. And so all I want to do is make sure those are staying inside the water. So I have obviously a much shorter water container because this grew so much basil since it's been in this container. I have to do a couple things. I have to thin it out, and I have to separate it into these 2 containers, which is an awesome problem to have. Honestly, I have tons of these little mason jars that I use for jam, jelly. I do this size of pickled jalapenos in the fall for Christmas presents. But what I wanted to do is take these out, and I want to look and see, am I getting this kind of damage? Like if it's starting to rot and I'm not seeing any places for it to node, I want to trim that off. I actually want to take and cut it. And I also want to thin out some of this foliage. So this basil plant is right now focused on producing and building all these leaves. So it's going to have a hard time putting on all of this foliage and developing roots. So I just want to come in here, and basil is one of those plants, like the more you pick it, the more you're going to get. But what I want with this is I want a whole new stalk. I want a viable stalk. So I'll come in and just pinch off a lot of these leaves, especially, I'm sure you saw this, but especially these great big, sections. And when they start to look like this, that means they are getting ready to flower. And so we don't want them to flower. Once basil goes to a flower stage, it's not going to put out any more fruit, which for basil is the leaves. Okay, so this one is picked up a little. I'm actually gonna break off, take a couple more. And this is actually gonna signal to this basil plant like, hey, something's happening. We need more leaves, we need more root system, all those types of things. Okay, so some of these will be, a little bit tough. I do like to trim off any of the dead sections on them. And this little end, you want to cut it kind of on an angle. I found that really helps too. And then just dipping it in the rooting powder. This is the one that I'm using here, the Bonade rooting powder. And then putting it back into a vase that's adequately sized for the amount of water it's going to need. Let's take a look at a couple of these others. So this one here, you can see, look at how much basil is on this plant. And some of these leaves are actually starting to brown. I want to show you why there is so much basil on this plant. You can see I harvested the top off of this already, and then that had the basil put out two side shoots essentially. So I'm just going to clean this up. I want it to keep producing, but if I have too many leaves on here, it's really going to be hard for it to develop the roots, and that's what I want when I'm trying to propagate new plants. So picking off some of these really big leaves, the ones that are taking a lot of energy, but you want to leave leaves on there so that it can do photosynthesis, right, and feed the plant. Any of them that look damaged, so you can see this one looks a little dry here, that guy's coming off. Because what happens is when you have damage like that, your plant is going to be sending nutrients to the damage on those leaves and encouraging, actually using up the resources to try and heal them. So again, I'm just gonna take this, dip it in my rooting powder. It's got a fresh new cut, you can see that. And I just dipped the rooting powder on there, and I'm gonna drop it in here. Take a look at a couple of these other ones. Okay, this guy's getting some roots. He's not getting roots here at the bottom, and that's looking a little mushy. So I'm just gonna cut it off, but I can see a root coming in here, here. So I'm happy, I'm super happy with this guy. This one is, oh, here's this teeny tiny one that I showed in the last video. So look, it only has this tiny little group of leaves on it, but it's growing these roots. And if you can't see, I don't really want to disrupt them too much, but there's the root right there. So you really don't need a ton of leaves in order for this to work. You just need to make sure the leaves you have are getting adequate amounts of sunlight, and that should be good. So this one I can see in 3 different places that it's bringing on roots. So I hope that this was super helpful. What I'm gonna do is take any of these portions that are, the little ends I cut off, stuff that I would deem unusable, and put it in my compost. So some of these leaves that were pretty bad. All of the other, so I mean, this is awesome too. I want to show this really quickly. This is a harvest of fresh basil that I just took off the plants that I'm propagating. So the whole point of this is to get more basil, more plants, and increase that harvest. And by propagating these just in water inside, I've been able to get essentially as much as I did on the harvest inside my bucket the other day. So if you love basil as much as we do, You really are going to love being able to propagate your basil, getting more and more out of each individual plant, getting more plants out of those plants. It's kind of exciting. It's a lot of fun. I do want to note that 2 of the plants that were in this initial jar that I set up on Friday, they didn't make it. They had some mold on them, and you're not gonna get 100% propagation on all your plants. So don't be discouraged by that. Just know that it's not 100% for sure. And keep going. I do wanna also, I'm gonna make a video showing how I dry my herbs and store them. And I hope that you will, subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified, and you can hit the bell icon. You'll be notified when those types of videos are published. So thank you so much for watching this. I hope it was very helpful, and have a fabulous day. I was getting ready to put up kind of round 2 of the basil propagation, and I thought it would be smart to show you how the basil that I trimmed, it's been 1 week and 2 days, and how it looks now. That has all of my Italian herbs in it, and you can see in here, this is the main stalk that we cut the top off, and then some of these that we took and cut, they were super tall, stringy, and not very full at all. So the basil is just producing more, and it's much more prolific since I cut it. You can see we have some of the seeds that I started coming up. And this one right here, not this guy right here, is the one that I actually transplanted out. So I just put a little rooting hormone on it and planted it out. And you can see it is just totally kicking butt. So I have 2 more kind of to show you. So these have been in for 7 days. And if you look at the root growth on that, because the temperatures are lower, I feel pretty confident that if I planted it, I mean, look at this. Look at that guy. Wow. Look at all those roots on there in 1 week. So I feel pretty confident that if I plant these out, that they are gonna make it. So I'm gonna show you how easy it is. Okay, it's like stupid cold out here for June. It's June in Utah. Should be 100 degrees. Will be Friday, but I'm in a hoodie. It's ridiculous. Okay, here we go. Let's focus. So this is legitimately how easy, and exactly what I did with this one. I just take this and poke a hole with my finger into the soil, stick the basil plant in, and packing around it. So here's this guy. He's a little funky, a little curvy, but I am just gonna poke a hole with my finger, stick him in, make sure all the roots are covered. So he has some that were pretty high up there. There you have it. That's it. So you can see I'm getting more basil because of how I'm, keeping it cut. That'll help it to put more on. It'll look, a lot more bushy, how this does. And I've already dried a ton of it as well. So hope this helps. Can't wait to see you next time.